Hey everyone, Jor from 88 Sats Radio, and I have a really great video for you here today. We're going to talk about the trade offs between different ways of storing your Bitcoin. I think this is probably going to be one of the most informative videos that I've personally made about cold storage and storing your Bitcoin. How about yourself, Jor?
Yeah, I think that this is probably the most underappreciated and under talked about aspect of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's very easy to buy Bitcoin. It's difficult to store it or protect it, and it's even harder to have it in 20 or 50 years from now, which is the whole point of this thing. So I think that this is an extremely important and relevant conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Jor. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I think we're gonna come up with a lot more of these videos. We're actually working on something that we're trying to create something that's going to create a lot of value for our audiences. So let's get started here. I have a list here of the different types of storage. So we have exchanges, we have hot wallets, we have cold wallets, we have multisig, multi jurisdictional custody. So we'll talk more about what they are and how they work, what the benefits, pros, cons are. But this is the list. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll make all of the notes here so you can follow along. So if you want to, you can take a screenshot of this, save it for later, whatever you want to do. But let's start with exchanges, Jor. What are your thoughts on storing your Bitcoin on an exchange?
I think before we go any further, I think it's important to kind of point this out at the start. Is that when you get into Bitcoin, you kind of have to have the mindset of that this is always going to be evolving. I think
Yeah.
that too many people get into Bitcoin, they pay somebody to help them get a hardware device to put it into cold storage, and they think they're just going to be able to look back or look in 20 years from now and figure out how to do it, make sure that the device still works. I think that you should have the mindset of this thing's always going to be evolving. There's going to be new technology. There's going to be new forms of like encryption. There's going to be new threats that come into Bitcoin. And so this is always going to be evolving. You never want to be static, and you never want to bury your keys in the backyard and hopefully you can get them in 50 years from now. This is something you got to pay very close attention to and understand that it's always going to be evolving.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of exchanges, I guess it really depends on what exchange you use. If you're using an exchange like ShakePay here in Canada, which is a pretty popular one, you do have
Yeah.
the ability to hold Bitcoin on the exchange. And I think that one problem with people learning about Bitcoin themselves and their own journey is that they first get into Bitcoin and they hear people say, not your keys, not your coins, which is absolutely true. But I really believe that for people who are, a month or two into Bitcoin, an exchange leaving it on there probably isn't the worst idea. However, as you're evolving, as you're becoming more knowledgeable and familiar with Bitcoin, that should be your first step is to take it off of the exchange. So it's good in the meantime, kind of like to make sure you don't lose it. You have to keep in
Yeah.
mind here that the majority of people who do lose their Bitcoin, it's not because they got hacked. It's not because somebody broke into their house or they, got tricked. It's because they overcomplicated their security setup and they went a little bit too fast in terms of trying to do too much at once. So I do think that for a couple months, it's okay on an exchange, but you should have the ultimate goal of taking it off there as soon as you're able to.
Yeah. Yeah. And then some of the cons of having your Bitcoin on an exchange are um, if your government says, "Oh, you don't deserve this Bitcoin," then you don't your accounts are going to be locked up, right? Your accounts are going to be locked up. Your Bitcoin is going to be frozen. It's going to be taken from you. If the exchange fails for whatever reason, then you're kind of screwed as well. What other cons are there?
I think both those are fairly low risk. However,
Yeah.
we've seen them in the past, and
Yeah.
they're definitely not a 0% chance. That's what you always
Yeah.
got to keep in mind here is that even though the odds of that would be low, and that's why I'm okay with people leaving it on there for a couple months. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. If the government decided that they don't want Canadians using Bitcoin anymore, the easiest thing that they could do is just subpoena or go after a company like ShakePay and just
Yeah.
freeze all the accounts. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have access to that Bitcoin, if you hold the keys to that Bitcoin, there's really nothing they can do without coming to your house. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what you want to keep in mind there is you don't want to have your Bitcoin, your wealth in the hands of somebody else. You don't want anybody's permission to be able to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And then okay, so after we go for exchanges, I feel like the natural progression is probably people moving their Bitcoin to a wallet that they created on their phone. So that would be a hot wallet. A hot wallet is basically just a wallet that's connected to the internet. It's always connected to the internet. You can't really disconnect it from the internet. So if as soon as your wallet touches the internet, your keys are at risk. Any thoughts of this?
Yeah, I think it's the same kind of thing. Like they are at risk, except they're pretty safe. Like I would
Yeah,
feel more comfortable, especially if you have a little bit of knowledge around Bitcoin. I do think that your Bitcoin would be much safer in a hot wallet that you control the keys to.
yeah,
That's kind of the first step with a hot wallet is just make sure that you can actually hold the keys to that. That's the first thing I would check when you're downloading a new wallet is does this wallet have a recovery phrase accessible? Because you have to kind of keep in mind here when we're talking about all this stuff, you're always going to have your signing device, which in this case would be your phone. That's how you're
yeah,
going to spend your Bitcoin. That's how you sign transactions to send Bitcoin. And then you have the recovery phrase where if something were to happen to that device, that's when you type in your 12 or 24 words to restore access to your Bitcoin. So
yeah,
they are two different things and they should be treated as such. They should be in different spots, right? I
yeah,
think one of the biggest mistakes that people make, and I made this mistake for way too long, but I would have my hardware device, which is very secure, very encrypted, and needs my PIN code to move any Bitcoin. And then right underneath that, I would have my 12 words or my steel plate. And it's like if somebody found that, my hardware device is locked, they can't do anything with that. But in plain text is 12 or 24 words, and they essentially take that, they can restore it into a wallet, and they now have access to my Bitcoin. So
yeah,
a couple of things to keep in mind there with that, I would say, which is for hot wallets and cold wallets. But in terms of like hot wallets, I have no issues with people keeping like 2, 5, 10% of their Bitcoin on hot wallet. It just makes it easier to, if you're somebody who spends Bitcoin or you're on Nostr, things like that. You don't always want to go through the cold storage to get it. So
yeah.
it is pretty safe. It's better than being on an exchange, but there are better ways to store your main stack of Bitcoin.
Why would you say that people shouldn't keep their entire stack on a hot wallet?
There's just too much risk. It's connected to the internet. When you're in this thing for the long term and you understand what you're holding, you want to separate that as
Yeah,
many ways as you can. And taking it into cold storage, which we're going to be talking about next, it does take it offline. It completely removes that vulnerability, that threat from somebody hacking your phone, stealing your laptop. It kind of separates that and adds another layer of security on top of that.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so um, anything that I missed on the pros and cons for hot wallets? Safer than an exchange, taking self custody, so you get full control of your Bitcoin. You own your seed phrase. You can move your Bitcoin from place to place. Um, Obviously, nobody can take your Bitcoin from a centralized exchange, which is great. Of course, that applies here. Um, Anything else?
I don't think so. I think that one thing to keep in mind with your hot wallets is that you're much more likely to be part of like a phishing scam or something. If you accidentally
Mm,
type in your words anywhere online,
yeah,
it's much more accessible to somebody as opposed to putting it on paper steel or encrypting it. It just makes you never want to be the lowest hanging fruit. That's
yeah,
what I would say, and I think that this is a pretty good way to explain that in terms of taking it off the exchanges into hot wallet and then a cold wallet and then kind of dispersing it from there. But you just never want to be the lowest hanging fruit. And on an exchange where somebody could subpoena that company and lock your funds or gain access to it, that's
yeah.
kind of what you want to avoid here.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that I don't know, I don't know how likely this is, but the way that I see it, my screen can be seen by anybody in the world. My my camera is accessible by anybody in the world. As long as it's connected to the internet, it's possible. Do you think that's possible when, let's say, when you set up your hot wallet, they show you they show you the seed phrase in just plain words, and you can go on your phone, you just write it down on a piece of paper. Do you think it's possible that anybody could read that while you're writing it down?
Of course, I would say that the one benefit that guys like me and you have in terms of being very non-technical is
Yeah,
that I always just assume the worst. I have no
yeah,
idea who's watching, who's listening, who can see my screen, and I always just kind of go on the assumption that somebody can. And when you go into the
yeah,
assumption that somebody's always watching you, then you're a lot more protective with important information here. And so that's a great call. Honestly, it's like whenever you're writing down your 12 words, always make sure that you're doing it in a room where there's no cameras, your webcam, your phone camera. You should never say it out loud in terms
Yeah.
of like, because your phone's always listening to you. You have to pay very close attention to the environment that you're in when you're writing down your 12-word recovery phrase. That's a big part of it. And
Yeah.
again, even though I don't know enough to know that that's a realistic threat, I'm just going to
Yeah.
assume that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the key. When you, as long as you, as soon as you connect it to the internet, you're kind of screwed. And okay, so that actually takes us to the next topic here. Why are cold wallets so great?
First of all, I got to give you some huge props here for conducting a conversation and taking notes here. Like I would still be on the first word. I can't do two things at once. So big props to you for doing this. This is important stuff, and I think that,
Yeah,
like you said, people are going to get a lot of value from this video. So
absolutely.
cold wallets essentially is you're building another layer on top of your security. You're taking it offline. The best way to do that would be through an air gapped route, which you can have with Cold Card, with the Blockstream Jade, and the Foundation Passport. Those all have air gapped ways to take your Bitcoin offline without connecting it to the computer there. So again, it just adds a layer of security there. I mean, anything, you don't have to be a technology expert to understand the fact that things are safer when they're offline as opposed to being available online for people. So I don't think we need to get too complex with that. It's just
Yeah,
it's the way to store your Bitcoin if you're serious about this stuff.
yeah. Okay, so pros. Obviously, never connects to the internet. Never connects to the internet. Um, it never it never touches. So the way that I see it, the way that I like to look at this is, if somebody wanted to hack your exchange, because you have an app for your exchange on your phone, they can connect to your phone. If for however, I don't know how they would do it. I have no idea. I'm not a tech expert. I'm not a security expert. But if they can connect to your phone, they can potentially take your Bitcoin. Like they can do something. They can interact with your phone from a remote location. But the good thing with cold wallets is they can't, because they never
Right.
touch the internet.
Right. That's the key thing there, is that it separates it. So in order to actually let's use Sparrow as an example. Sparrow's my favorite Bitcoin wallet. I suggest that everybody use this to hold your Bitcoin. But
Yeah,
you could download the Sparrow wallet, and you could set up a hot wallet on there within Sparrow. So you can download a hot wallet. The problem with that is if that's your signing device on your laptop. So if somebody gained
yeah,
access to your laptop, if they stole your laptop, they could essentially easily move your Bitcoin.
yeah,
Whereas if you connect it to cold storage, where you actually have to use the device to sign it, even if somebody came across your laptop and hacked it or stole it, they actually
yeah,
can't do anything with your laptop without having your signing device there. So it kind of disconnects them there.
yeah.
But
So
that's a
nobody can
big
do.
part of it.
And I like the what I okay. So back to what you were talking about, the air gapped before, air gapped. So the good thing about something like the, actually, I don't know how the Blockstream Jade works. I haven't used it before. How
It's
does the
all QR
Blockstream?
codes.
Oh, it's QR code. So you have, what do you have, like a camera on the actual device?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And
So
then,
if
oh
if
no,
you
go
want
ahead.
to send a transaction, you actually scan your Jade, and then you have to scan the Sparrow Wallet QR code there. So it's all done through QR codes. It's not connected to like a USB. It's not. You can do it all offline. It's all done with QR codes. So that's a good way to air gap it, is with a Jade.
Okay, and then with the cold card, so I personally use the cold card, and with the cold card, basically what you're doing is you're taking a micro SD card, you're putting it into an SD card adapter, I guess it's called,
Yep.
and then you can connect it to your device, your laptop, your computer, and then you can approve the transactions using that. So what you can do is you can use the data on your computer to put it on the micro SD card, and then you can connect that micro SD card to your cold card, and then you can approve transactions from there, which to me is pretty interesting. It's kind of cumbersome. I mean, it's kind of difficult to do. It's actually pretty annoying to do, but I guess that works out in another way as well. It
It should
stops
be
you
annoying.
from
It should be
spending.
hard, right?
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
stops you from spending, right? It stops you from making impulse decisions. Like there have been times where I've been thinking, oh, maybe I can buy this thing, or I can buy this thing. and I'm just thinking, how hard would it be for me to transfer money from my cold card to my exchange and then sell my Bitcoin? This is so annoying, but I mean, it's a good thing. I like that.
Yeah.
I genuinely like it.
Yeah, and I think that that's the beauty of Bitcoin, and just kind of like that setup in terms of like an air gapped cold card using Sparrow. The nice thing about that is every time you want to send Bitcoin to your Sparrow wallet,
Yeah,
even if it's in cold storage, you don't have to bring out your cold card. You don't have to bring out your 12 words. You just receive it to your Sparrow address, but you actually can't move Bitcoin out of there until you
yeah.
sign the transaction. So it's very easy to send into it. It's hard to send out of it, which is exactly what you want in Bitcoin.
I was actually thinking, maybe this is also something that would be great for merchants, right? Because what they could do is they could use some kind of POS terminal
Hmm.
where they generate a QR code, whatever needs to be scanned to send Bitcoin to an address, and then they can keep that cold card in a completely different place.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea is there. You really have to pay. Again, everybody's at different parts of their Bitcoin journey here. Everybody has
Yeah,
different knowledge. Everybody's more comfortable with technology than others. Your security setup really has to be adaptive to where you're at,
yeah.
right? Because we could talk about the most complex multi-sig, multi-jurisdictional cold storage, but it's like if you do that before you're ready to, that's a pretty good chance you're going to overcomplicate things and just lose access to your Bitcoin. You have to be able to spend your Bitcoin,
Yeah.
otherwise you don't own it.
What you said was really important. I forgot to mention it here. The majority of mistakes are going to come from people who lose their Bitcoin on their own.
Yes.
The majority of losses of Bitcoin, I guess, will come from
Yep.
people who lose their Bitcoin on their own. They make the mistakes, come from mistakes, because what they're going to do is they're going to set these things up wrong, or they're going to, let's say, for example, if you try to send your Bitcoin from your exchange to your wallet, and you accidentally hit the backspace and then you add another number by accident, your Bitcoin is gone.
Um, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that this is something. I actually posted this on Nostr and tagged NVK in it. But I'll tell you from my couple years of like helping people and within Bitcoin, there's two main things that people lose their Bitcoin two ways, or their money. Number
Yeah.
one is they overcomplicate things. They use something like this, and I hate this card. I absolutely hate this card because this comes with every cold card. I mean, they do it as like a good service for people, but
Oh
this
yeah.
thing is so small and it's so hard to write legibly on this thing, and people lose these so easily. Like, look how small this is.
Yeah.
You write it down, you leave it on your desk, your housekeeper throws it away, or your dog eats it. Like, put it on something solid, and maybe we'll talk about at the end of this. But like, make sure that
Share it again just so people can see it. Sorry, I didn't realize you weren't in full screen. Yeah, that
no,
thing.
that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So like the key with this whole thing is this is what you're going to restore your if something ever happens to your signing device. It could be your phone, it could be your laptop, it could be like a cold card. But
Hmm.
you use this if you ever lose that.
Yeah.
And if you're keeping all of your wealth on this little flimsy piece of paper here, like that's a recipe for a disaster. So when you get a cold card, throw this in the garbage because this is I told them like don't send this out to any more people because the only people I've seen lose their Bitcoin are the people who wrote it down on this and just lost this. And then they forget
Yeah.
their PIN code, they can't access their device, and then they don't have access to their Bitcoin anymore.
And
So
what
so
Jor is
go ahead.
referring to there is your wallet actually generates something called a seed phrase when you set it up. And you can just write down those words on that piece of paper. And then you can, if you need to, let's say your cold card gets destroyed, your Trezor gets destroyed. Every wallet creates these seed phrases. Every wallet uses the same um, encryption, I guess.
I think it's
Same
BIP 39. Yeah.
BIP 39, yeah. So BIP 39, each one uses the same code or same language, whatever it's called, and you can recover your Bitcoin in any wallet. If your cold card breaks, if your Trezor breaks, if your Blockstream Jade breaks, whatever happens, you can recover your Bitcoin in another wallet. If you memorize those words, you can do the same thing. So let's say, for example, if you wanted to go from one place to another and you've just memorized your words, let's say, for example, your house sets on fire, similar to what happened in LA, um, and you can't go into the house. You've memorized your seed phrase. What you can do is you can write it down, and then you can take it somewhere else if you want to. But if you've memorized it, you don't have to worry about, oh, my house burned down. Now I can't access my Bitcoin. All that stuff is so important to make sure you don't lose your Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have mixed feelings on memorizing it for a few reasons,
Mm,
but if you think about it, like the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is it's the only asset you can actually truly own. Because if you have
yeah,
12 words memorized in your head, nobody can take that from you.
yeah,
And so if you are in a country where your government's very tyrannical and coming after you, you can literally memorize your 12 words. You could have $1 billion in your Bitcoin wallet. You memorize those 12 words, you hop on an airplane, you get to a different country, you restore that into a wallet, and all of a sudden you have your Bitcoin. What other asset could you take $1 billion worth on a plane? Try doing that with gold or cash or anything. So
yeah.
it's so magical to me, the fact that you can do that. You can't do that with any other asset, and that's such a huge value add for Bitcoin. The fact that you can do that.
All I know is that if you try to carry too much gold across the border with you, it's going to hurt a lot.
Yeah, Bitcoin, you don't have to shove up your butt.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to have it weighing pounds and pounds. I mean, you're probably going to have to go to the washroom. So okay, let's go back to the
Yeah,
let's
and
go back.
before people start memorizing their 12 words, I would say a
Yeah,
couple things on it. Number one, never rely on that. Like even
yeah,
if you think you're being like the smartest person and you're nobody can take it from you, if you got
yeah,
hit by a bus tomorrow and your memory's gone, your Bitcoin's gone with it. So it's
yes,
a good like secondary thing to have maybe, but don't ever rely on it 100% to have in your brain. I don't think.
exactly. Hey, and I want to ask you a question. What would you say about sharing your seed phrase with
Oh,
your spouse?
yeah, this is actually something that I made the big mistake of early in my Bitcoin career here. Because kind of my rules in life is like two is one and one is none. In other words, you should have a backup for everything. You should never
Mhm.
have a single point of failure in anything. But the thing that I didn't really understand there that is that you have your device and then you have your recovery phrase. So that is essentially your backup. So that is two. You lose your signing device, you can recover it.
Yeah,
If you lose your recovery phrase, you still have your device which you can send Bitcoin to. But the problem I made is I took my 12 words and I was like, you know what? If something happens to my house, if it burns down, I want to be able to restore this. So I put it in like a friend's or a family's house. So I had one copy here, I had one copy there, the same words. But then I was like, I got to thinking like somebody could easily break into their house if they're not securing this properly for me. Somebody could break into their house and all of a sudden they have my Bitcoin. I'm not even there. I don't know what happened. Totally out of my control. So you
yeah,
really have to pay attention to where your recovery phrase is in plain text, because if anybody comes across that, they now own your Bitcoin.
yeah. That's one of the things about Bitcoin. The only thing that you really own is that seed phrase. The Bitcoin stays on the internet. It's not like it goes into your device. Like
Right.
if you have a cold storage device, it's not like your Bitcoin goes into that device, and if it breaks, then it gets destroyed or whatever for whatever reason. What you can do is you can move that Bitcoin on the internet, and it stays on the internet. The only thing that's physical is what you write down, like your seed phrase. So if somebody else has that seed phrase, your Bitcoin is gone. They can take your Bitcoin, but then at the same time, if you lose your seed phrase, your Bitcoin is gone.
Well, it is, but if you have your sign device still, then you're okay,
Yes, yes, yes,
right?
yes. You're right.
That's why I think people should look at it as like two separate entities there. Your signing device, like your cold card here,
Yeah.
and then you have your recovery phrase. Those are two different things. You could lose one of these and still have access to it, but if you lost both of these, then your Bitcoin's gone.
So, what would you say about just having multiple signing devices in
I
different
think it's a good
locations?
idea. I think the further you get into Bitcoin, you should have like let's walk through an example here of like a natural progression. You get your Bitcoin on an exchange, you leave it there for a couple months as you get more familiar with like Bitcoin security. You
Yeah,
move it to like a hot wallet, like a Moon wallet, or anything like an Exodus. There's a lot of good wallets online, and
yeah,
then you move it to a cold storage once you're familiar with it, once you have a good understanding of it, and then you maybe get a secondary one, and you could use
yeah,
that for a decoy wallet, or you could just separate your stack into a different one. But then the nice thing is that you can kind of evolve. These devices will evolve with you, so you could take your original device plus your secondary device, and then get a third device while still all using these in sync in tandem. You can actually create a multi-signature setup with that,
yeah.
which is the
Okay,
next
with a
thing we're going
new,
to talk about here.
yes, exactly. With a new wallet, second device with a new wallet. Okay, so that's great. Okay, could lose your Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Same thing with the other one,
it's
but
more complicated, right?
more
You
complicated.
have to have a pretty good idea of what you're doing to, use a hardware device. There are some really
Yeah,
easy ones now, like the BitKey, I think is very easy to use and very hard to screw up.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
think the
yeah,
Trezor is pretty easy to use, though.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like you can go from having, you can probably go from setting it up from scratch all the way to having your Bitcoin in, like your Bitcoin in that wallet, within probably 15 minutes.
And Trezor now has a firmware update where you can actually it's Bitcoin only.
Yeah.
So maybe at the top there you should put that in there. Make sure that when you're using
Oh yeah.
exchanges, devices,
Yeah.
wallets, do your best to make sure that they're Bitcoin only. And again, it just kind of reduces the attack vectors, the vulnerabilities. Like
Yeah.
if you got a bunch of altcoins on there, there's more opportunity for people to attack it.
Yeah.
So anything within Bitcoin, you always want to make sure if you can to use Bitcoin only.
Yeah. Add altcoins, add complexity to storage. So
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I think it's important. Um, I think if the exchange, to be honest, like with ShakePay, they have Ethereum, but I think with exchanges, as long as you can withdraw your Bitcoin, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, and that was one of the things with like Robinhood, I think it was, where you
Hmm.
could actually buy Bitcoin, but you couldn't take it off there. You can
Yes.
now.
Yeah, they
So
changed it. Yeah.
absolutely, that should be like your number one priority aside from like a Bitcoin only is that the fact that you can actually withdraw your Bitcoin because otherwise it's just it's what would you call that even fake Bitcoin, paper Bitcoin?
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you can withdraw your Bitcoin from an exchange. Sorry, did you say fake Bitcoin?
Yeah, like paper Bitcoin.
Oh yeah.
If you can't actually take if you can't withdraw it, it's not really there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Okay, so let's go into multisig now. Actually, I think we could do multisig and multi-jurisdictional together,
Okay.
right? All right. Okay, let's go into multisig and multi-jurisdiction because I think that they're both pretty relevant to one another. So
Yeah, so I like to think of multisig as like it's another layer of security on top of that. It removes your single point of failure, where if
yeah,
somebody broke in your house and got your device, they can't do anything with just one signature. And probably the best way to think about this is like in the traditional way. If anybody's ever sat on like a board of directors or been part of an organization where in order to send any money, just like we're sending Bitcoin here, if you want to write a check, you actually need two signatures on that check for it to be cashable.
yeah,
And so multi-sig acts the exact same way. You need two signatures, two different devices to sign the transaction to move any Bitcoin out of there.
yeah,
And so this is a really good way to do things if you want, again, if you're taking this stuff seriously, if you have a significant amount of Bitcoin, I highly suggest a multi-sig type of setup. And it
yeah,
is more complex and you should probably have some help with it. But that's kind of where you want to get to in terms of your setup is like with a multi-sig um, setup there. It just takes the
yeah.
risks away from you.
Yeah, it also, I know a lot of people are probably worried about, oh, what if somebody guesses my seed phrase? The chances of that
Right.
are extremely low. But what this does is it makes it even lower because you have to find two seed phrases.
Right. And this is the kind of this is where you want to get to in your setup because you have to play through all these different scenarios in your head of like what could go wrong. You
Yeah,
should actively think about this as any Bitcoiner. You should come up with like a visualization of like what could go wrong here, whether that's fire, whether that's government intervention, whether that's somebody breaking into your house, whether that's your dog eating it. Like you have to come up with your potential attacks or potential vulnerabilities and then find ways to counteract that in your own setup over time.
yeah,
And so the nice thing about this is if you had a multi-sig setup and somebody broke into your house or your house burned down, you could still use the other two out of three keys in that setup to move that Bitcoin.
yeah. Okay. So pros are, of course, remove single point of failure. Um, but that comes with a lot of trade-offs. The issue is that if you have multiple wallets, if you have multiple devices, you need to have access to them. So let's say, for example, if you can't access your second device, you can't access your Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. If two out of the three, like let's say that you're trusting two people, One
Yeah.
thing you got to keep in mind when you're using multi-sig setup is you have to have two other people in your life that you can trust, or two other places that you
Yeah.
can trust. Because if you have all three devices in your house in a multi-sig, that defeats the whole purpose of it,
Yeah.
right? So you have to have people in your life that you can trust. And you have to understand that if those two people either collude or both lose your devices or screw it up, your Bitcoin's gone.
Yeah.
So you kind
So
of you remove the single point, but you also put some trust into to other locations and people out there.
so would you say maybe use people, or not use people, to give responsibility to people who don't know each other?
Yes, 100%. And you have to be very strategic with this. Like, this isn't
Yeah.
something that you just like decide after watching this video you want to do multi-sig and just like send it to your coworker and one to your cousin. Like,
Yeah.
you have to be very thoughtful and very strategic with where you leave your devices, how easy you can access those, and how
Yeah.
trustworthy they are in your life.
Yeah. More complicated. It's much more complicated. Oh, and you also have to do more work to make sure um that you're doing it properly. So you may have to go through a company like Unchained Capital, or I don't know any others.
Casa's
OnRamp,
one, Casa.
Casa. Okay, I'll just put
Nunchuck,
those
I think,
examples.
does the same kind of thing.
What I'll do is here I'll put those examples. We're not endorsing either of these. I can't tell you whether or not these companies will be around in 30 years, but here are some examples. So one of them is uh, example companies. There's On-Chain Capital, Casa.
Yep.
What else is there any others that you
Unchained.
can think of?
I
Sorry, what
think
was it?
Unchained.
Sorry, Unchained, not On-Chain.
I think
Unchained.
on-chain, oh, maybe I'm thinking of something else too, but yeah,
I
Unchained
think
for
it's
sure.
On-Ramp.
On-ramp, yeah, that's right.
On-Chain.
That's right.
Unchained Capital. Unchained On-Ramp. I think that's what it is. On-Ramp. Just look at these companies. You can do the research yourself. Do the research. Don't just rely on what we're saying here. Do the research for yourself. Verify everything that we're saying for yourself. Um, Try to go through multiple sources if you can. You want to make sure that your Bitcoin is not going to get lost. Like if you watch this video and you do something that we say and you do it wrong, we can't help you recover your Bitcoin. So make sure you do the
Yeah,
research. Make sure you actually put in the time before you do this. I think the move from a exchange to a hot wallet is pretty simple, but after that it gets a little bit more complicated. You want to be more confident with what you're doing. So I think that's important.
I agree.
Um,
And I think the one thing I'd add to that is like if you are going through this, like let's say you have a big stack of Bitcoin and
yeah,
you're like not sleeping well at night, you're very anxious about it because your knowledge level isn't up to your Bitcoin holdings.
yeah,
Maybe me and Rajat will both put our contact information. Like I help people pretty much every day with this kind of stuff. Now, this is my
mhm,
main focus is like helping people make sure they have their Bitcoin in 50 years from now.
yeah,
So there are a lot of intricacies there. There's a lot to know. So you can either spend a bunch of time learning it yourself, or you can have somebody like Rajat or myself kind of help you through it step by step. So we'll
absolutely.
we'll we'll put that down below. I do suggest people, if you're especially when you're getting into like a multi-sig, multi-jurisdictional type of setup, you should probably be getting help with that or investing a bunch of your time.
There are different services that help you with this. You don't need to do all of this on your own. You can go on Google, you can search for it, how to set up a cold card, or how to set up a hot wallet. Like if you don't, let's say for example, you're just an anonymous person, you don't want to expose yourself to anybody. You could just search for it on your own. It may take you a little bit more time, but I mean, if that's how you think of it, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And there are options now. There are services, and I'm actually
Yeah,
part of a venture or a company who's like helping people with this collaborative custody model with encryption. And the thing that I love most about it is it's completely non KYC, and you should be kind of seeking that out as much as you can to remain private.
yeah,
There's no KYC. We have no idea how much Bitcoin you have. We don't hold a key to it, and so that's kind of some of the trade offs if you're looking at Unchained and Casa, is that it's full KYC. They know who you are, they know how much Bitcoin you have. They have the ability, even though it's a very, very small chance that it happens, there is a chance that they could essentially rug you. So I'm
yeah.
not saying they will. I don't think that they ever would, but they can. That's the point, is that they could.
Exactly. That's the key. If you can avoid the single points of failure, then you can even diversify with multiple
Yes. And
ways
that's
of
probably the
storage.
best idea, honestly.
Yeah,
Once you get a significant or once Bitcoin becomes as valuable as we think it's going to, you
Yeah.
should absolutely look at having some, maybe with a collaborative custody, maybe encrypted, maybe someone's titanium,
Yeah.
maybe someone a hot walled. Like this is just, again, it's a natural evolution, and you just have to be aware of, very mindful of where you are in terms of your knowledge versus how much Bitcoin you have.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's look at the next one here. I think the natural progression, of course, is collaborative custody.
Yeah, and I kind of just touched on that. That's similar to like Unchained, where instead of you trusting like relatives or friends with other keys, they actually hold a key for you. So they're
Yeah,
reputable companies. They charge a fee. They know who you are. They know your business dealing. So there are definitely trade-offs there, but probably a good step for people who have like a lot of Bitcoin and zero knowledge.
yeah. So I think the best way to describe multisig and collaborative custody is like a bank vault where sorry, not even a bank vault. It would be something like a safety deposit box where if you were to go to a bank and you wanted to set up your own safety deposit box, what you can do is you have a key and they have to have a key. So if you go in and you try to go into your vault without their key, they can't access, or you can't access your vault. If they go in without your key, they can't access your vault either. So both of you have to be together in order to access that vault and in order
Right.
to move whatever you need in it. So what you're doing with collaborative custody is in with multisig, instead of only having two keys like you would with a safety deposit box, you would have three keys. So you need two out of those three keys to move your Bitcoin. With collaborative custody, what you're doing is you're holding one key, then you're giving one of your keys to one of these companies, so Unchained, Casa, OnRamp,
Right.
and then the third key goes to that collaborative custody partner. So this is where the trade-offs come in. I think you were mentioning this before, Jory. You were saying how they could rug pull you. They could these like these companies could work together
They
and
could.
they could
Very, very low odds of that happening.
very
Like
low odds. Yeah,
I don't want to misinterpret this for people as like that this is a high chance it could happen. Very
yeah,
low, but again, the point is that let's say Unchained and whoever they're using to store your other key could collude. They have
yeah,
2 out of 3 devices there. They could move your Bitcoin without you knowing
yeah,
about it. They could. That's the point. Not that they would, but they could.
yeah. I mean, the chances of that are very low. I think the key that me and Joe are trying to point out to you here is that you should know what the potential
Yes,
is for things to go wrong. Because if you don't know what the potential is, then you get rug pulled. You have no idea what happened. Like, let's say, for example, you have people who are in their 70s, 80s who get a call from a scammer, and the scammer tells them, hey, you need to give us some gift cards. If you have no idea what the scam is, then you're going to fall for it. In this case, you
exactly.
know that you probably shouldn't keep all of your Bitcoin in collaborative custody. You could keep collaborative custody, then you could keep a wallet at home with your own Bitcoin. You could combine different methods, and you can make it so much easier for yourself. You can make it actually not easier, more secure.
More secure, yeah. You should find the optimal security setup is easy and secure.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be
yeah,
too easy and it shouldn't be too secure, but like the old Goldilocks and the Three Bears, there's somewhere in between.
yeah. Easy and secure.
And yeah, easy and secure. That's what you want.
That's
You
it.
don't want to overcomplicate it, but you don't want to be too easy. It's the same
Yeah,
with pin codes, passwords. Like you want to make a pin code that you're going to remember, but also not 0000, right? So it's like
yep,
it's the same kind of thing throughout the whole process here.
yeah. So in this case, in the regular multisig, you have to hold two keys. In this case, you only hold one.
Right.
I think
And
that's
even
the
if you
main
lose
difference.
your key, you can still, essentially those two companies could unlock your Bitcoin for you. That's the kind of point of it,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. So again, the benefit here is that let's say you pass away and you have your collaborative custody set up in your will, in your estate, whatever it is. The thing that I don't personally like, the thing that I can't wrap my head around is um, the fact that they can recover your Bitcoin. If something happens to you, they
Yeah,
can give it to your family. But who's to say? Who's to guarantee that that's not going to happen if you don't pass away?
exactly.
Let's say somebody creates a fake death certificate, and I mean AI can change things a lot, right? It can make things a lot more
Yeah,
complicated
I
for
didn't
these
even think
companies.
about that.
right? Like it makes it a lot more difficult for these companies to verify who you are. Let's say, for example, your company is in another country and your family wants to recover your Bitcoin. These are things that you need to think about. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but these are things that you need to think about. You need to think through this, because if you don't understand this, you're not going to be able to sleep properly. You're not going to be able to, um, you might sleep properly, but let's say
Yeah,
one day
because
your
you don't
Bitcoin
know.
gets
Yeah,
taken, you're screwed, right? Your wealth is gone. Everything you've saved is gone.
I think that's the biggest threat to Bitcoiners, honestly, is what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
might be sleeping great, but you have no idea, the kind of threats that are out there that are existing. So yeah, it's there's a lot to know. I would say another con to collaborative custody is they know all your information. Like in order
Yeah.
to get an unchained account, they have to know your name. They know how much Bitcoin you have. That's a big problem to me. So as you're typing here, I just want to mention one thing. This is
Yeah.
kind of something that new-ish, but there are ways that you can essentially create a collaborative custody without another company involved. And I don't want to say a whole lot in here because I don't want to confuse people. I think that would kind of defeat the purpose of this. But
Yeah.
I will just say there are ways to do this collaborative custody in terms of your inheritance, in terms of encrypting your Bitcoin and your data. Very, very good way to do this. And it's kind of a service that I'm working on and we're already helping people with. So this would be applicable to somebody out there who has a large Bitcoin balance. They don't want to be the single point of failure and they have somewhat sufficient knowledge of Bitcoin. Then you'd be kind of like a perfect candidate for this. So
Yeah.
again, we're going to put our details below and it's called Superback. So you can actually look at it yourself. I don't want to be too secretive about it. It's not something I created, but
Is that what
look
it
up
is? Superback?
superback.com, ED at the end of that, superback.com. You can see the software, you can see the encryption, how it works. And if you want help getting set up or you need like a second eyes, just reach out to me. This is something we've been helping people, more advanced Bitcoiners for sure,
Yeah.
but it will become a lot more, I think, mainstream in the future because it just makes so much sense. So
Yeah.
it's all non KYC. We don't have any idea how much Bitcoin you have. You can encrypt your setup and you can do multi-jurisdictional, multisig. It's very flexible to whatever you need based on your own situation. So that's what I would plug in there for it.
Amazing. Yeah, that's great. Again, all these things are things that you want to know about. You don't want to be in that situation where you have no idea what's happening, because over time this is going to revolve. It's going to change so quickly.
Yes,
Sorry, not revolve, evolve. It's going to change so quickly that if you miss understanding these things, the future is going to seem even more complicated and you're never going to be able to wrap your head around it. I think that's so important to understand.
100%. You have to have a very good understanding. Your foundation has to be solid, and then
Yeah.
you build on top of that.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about the last method here, Uncle Jim method. You actually told me about this today. I didn't even understand this. I mean, the concept is pretty self-explanatory, but go ahead with your explanation.
Yeah, so this is something for a little bit more advanced Bitcoiners. It essentially acts as like you're the Bitcoiner in your family.
Yeah.
And one thing you could do with like a cold card is you can actually generate seed phrases from your wallet. So you generate a seed phrase for like a family member. Let's say it's your son, your spouse. You give them the private key. Everything's good. They have access to it. But because they're somewhat newer into Bitcoin, or you don't fully trust they're going to protect that, or don't lose it, then the cold card actually stores that seed in your cold card that you can always go back to later. So if something were to happen to their 12 or 24 words, it's still going to be held in your cold card that's only accessible to you. So
Yeah.
you could essentially be like the Uncle Jim in your family who's like, managing people's wallets. I don't suggest this for people who are somewhat new to Bitcoin, but the pros are that your family members aren't going to lose their Bitcoin. Um, the cons is that you have to have some sort of sufficient knowledge in Bitcoin to be able to use it.
I think there's also it's almost like having would you say this is almost like having a copy of your seed phrase with someone else,
Yes, exactly that.
right?
So it would be stored in your cold card. Only you can access that. And if something were to happen to their 12 word, their wallet, if they lost it, they might not know you have it, but you do have that stored in your phone. So I guess that would be another con if you had a bunch of seed phrases and all of a sudden Bitcoin's worth 5 million, you could just go rogue on your family and just
Yeah.
steal all their Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess you have to trust yourself.
Yeah, your family members have to trust you for sure. And I mean, if
Yeah.
you're a Bitcoiner, they probably do, but there is potential for, you know, some wrongdoing there.
Yeah. I think Bitcoiners in general, though, are, I mean, I don't know, this may be just a blanket statement, but I feel like they're more trustworthy. Just
Yeah,
because, I mean, if the Bitcoin is worth $5 million, you probably have like $4 million of it. So
exactly.
what's the point of ruining relationships with your family by taking their Bitcoin?
Yeah, and who are you going to enjoy your wealth with if it's
Exactly.
not your best friends and your family members? So
Yeah,
I'd
that's
say
it.
it's a threat, but it's not a realistic threat.
I guess the other con could be, let's say they lose their seed phrase. Because if you're giving them the words and uh, let's say they take it around with them and they put it in their purse and their purse gets stolen,
Yep,
their Bitcoin is gone.
yep. I mean, you could also use something like this in your own life if you want to
Yeah,
generate a few different wallets. Like that's probably the most advisable thing to do. So it's
yeah,
not all in one place and you're deriving it from a good source.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're giving it to a family member who has no idea what they're doing and they leave their
yeah,
12 words on their kitchen table, then
yeah,
their Bitcoin's going to be gone anyways. But that's a lesson that they learned the hard way.
yeah. So they have to understand Bitcoin custody. I think we've pretty much covered the majority of methods that most people will use to store their Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think that it's important just to give a bit of a time frame on this. Like,
Yeah,
if you're somebody who's just getting into Bitcoin now, or you're hearing about this stuff for the first time, like, don't ever panic. Don't ever be in a panic situation in Bitcoin. Just like
yeah,
take a breath, take it slow, understand where you are, and I think that people should start with like a hot wallet with your 12 words written down on a nice piece of paper, not on one of these things, but like a nice solid piece of paper. Put it in a very safe place. Maybe you're safe and then you kind of evolve into like a steel, titanium, encrypted. Then you evolve to a multisig and multi-jurisdictional and maybe collaborative custody if your balance gets up, or you use something like superbacked. But it should always be evolving, and you should just be aware and conscious of kind of where you are in that process. Um,
yeah. Just
just don't go
uh,
too fast or too far too fast.
yeah, that's the key. If you're going too far, too fast, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose your Bitcoin somehow. You're going to do something wrong. Put in the time. I feel like that proof of work is so important because when you actually understand what Bitcoin is, you know what you're protecting, and
Yeah.
you want to protect it with as much of your energy as possible.
Yes. 100%.
Awesome.
The last thing I would say, and I'm sure I haven't talked to you about this or anything, but the last thing I'd say is something I've started doing because again, Rajat and I both help people with this kind of stuff. Like this is, you know, it's something you have to take seriously. And so
Yeah.
one thing I would just say to anybody out there listening to this, you might heard something maybe turned your stomach, something you're doing wrong. I have no issues with somebody setting up like a 10, 15-minute call. I hate charging people by the hour and dragging it out there. So if you have like one question you want to ask me, like I've started to implement like this value for value thing into my life where if you just have like one simple question or you want a second opinion on your setup, just set up a call with me. You can send me whatever you think it's valued at. I'm not going to give you a price. You just send me whatever you think it's worth. So it's a good option for people if you don't want to set up like a full hour. You just want like one or two things to confirm or get my opinion on or rejects, then that option's there as well.
Yeah, I do it a little differently. So I have a fixed rate. So I have a 30-minute and an hour call. Depending on who you want to talk to, maybe Jor is the best way to go. Maybe you want to go with me. It doesn't matter. Either way, one of us will be able to help you if you want to go with, I guess, the the route where you can do as short of a call as you want. You can connect with Jor. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
And I think that going forward here, we had a nice chat before this episode today, but
Yeah.
we're going to be doing a lot more stuff. We think this is so important for people to be understanding at this stage, and so we'll probably be doing a lot more work together in the future. So even though our the way we do things are slightly different, we're going to be a lot more, I think, in sync in the future. So just keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Looking forward to those. I feel like those are going to be extremely valuable. We spent probably half an hour before this just brainstorming different ideas, thinking of different ways we could add value.
Yes. So if you have any questions, any concerns, if you want a second opinion, You know where to find us. Our contact information is on here. And maybe watch this twice because we covered it pretty quick. There's a lot to get through. It took longer than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
But watch it again. Watch it on 2x if you need to. But this is the most important part of your whole Bitcoin. It's easy to buy. It's harder to protect, and it's very hard to make sure you have it in 50 years for your family.
Amazing. Yeah, that's it. So what we'll do is, I don't know who's going to post this, whichever one of us posts this, we're going to link the YouTube channel of the other in the
Right.
description. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be alternating which channel we post on. So subscribe to both of us.
Good call.
Awesome. All right, Jor, any last comments on there?
No, I don't think so. Just again, take it slow. Just understand that it's always going to be evolving. And if you ever need a second opinion on anything, this is by far the most important part of your whole thing. So make sure you're building the right foundation with your Bitcoin security.
100% agreed. Perfect.